I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. And hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMar, and I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood,
and our special in-studio guest,
Luke Kasparian.
Yes, and we are bringing to you today the show For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a program where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in terms of you, your health, your happiness, your wealth, your pocketbook. And we've got a very good show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking with Luke in a little bit. Luke is one of the people who was on the ground trying to get the petition signed for HB 6, trying to put that referendum on the ballot so that you would have a choice on whether or not you wanted to support nuclear and coal power and to axe wind and solar. So he had some very intense experiences, and I wanted to share them with you. I mean, you've all heard reports about what went on. So we've got someone here who actually experienced some of this thuggery, shall we say. And so we'll be talking with him in a little bit. Then we'll be hearing from our terrific sponsors. And then today's show is going to be focusing very directly on the whole your health thing. We're going to be talking about tea, and we're going to be talking about these reports of stuff in your tea, which tea is a wonderful, healthy drink. I mean, there's all kinds of studies that show it helps prevent things like Alzheimer's, and it's a beverage that tastes good. Lots of people love it. But we've been hearing reports about stuff in your tea, so that's what we're going to talk about.
He's the only reason I have any brains left at all, Joe.
Right. Well, and I won't take your tea from you, but there is some stuff we have to think about.
Cold dead hands.
Right. And hopefully we'll be hearing from you. This is a call-in show, and we value and cherish all your calls at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. And you can call at any time in the show and talk about any environmental topic, anything that's struck you during the week, any report you heard, any really cool thing that you saw. Maybe you saw some migrating birds, and we'd like a report on that if you saw like 10,000 geese at some point or something, because from what I've been able to observe and what people I know have been able to observe, there were very few migrating birds this past fall. And so, whatever you've seen that you'd like to tell everybody about. And we are very grateful, I want to say off the bat, for your listenership. Rebecca and I are here every week, and we get to talk about ecology and environment for an entire hour. But don't worry, sports is back on the way. It's promptly at 9. Mick Gonzalez will be back here with the cheap seats. And so, this is not too heavy a show, but we do need to talk about what needs to be talked about. And I wanted to start off with a little personal experience of my own. This past week, we drove my son down to Washington, D.C. I wasn't there for any kind of conference, or I wasn't, lobbying our legislatures or anything. My son went to school at Gallaudet University down there, and his class had a reunion, and so we drove him down there in our fantastic hybrid van, the Chrysler Pacifica, which we love so much. And it struck me again every time I drive down there on the East Coast, just how screwed up our transportation system is. Because they do have excellent light rail in D.C., and they have excellent buses, but it's still mostly car dependent. And there was a point there, I mean, if you've ever driven in the traffic in D.C. and the Baltimore area, you know it's just insane. And there was a point there, I believe we were on the Washington-Baltimore Parkway. There, according to my wife's cell phone, there were accidents on the parkway on either side in both directions. And there was one point where we stopped. The whole traffic was stopped, and it was 4 lanes of traffic in both directions. And as far as the eye could see, tens of thousands of cars just sitting there.
Giant parking lot, running their engines, putting carbon in the air. And if all those people had taken the light rail, the commuter stuff that was available to them, because most of them weren't out-of-town visitors like us trying to get from city to city. Most of them were commuters. And, had they been on the train, that would have been tons of carbon. I mean, literally, we saw tons of carbon being put into the air. And at this point in our history as a society, we know we can't keep doing that. And so every one of those cars should have been at least a hybrid, because our car, at least we were sitting there, and I found this nifty new app on our car that I was showing it to Rebecca this morning on the way in, that shows exactly how much power the engine's putting out, how much power the battery's putting out, when the battery's charging, and how much. And so we were sitting there in that parking lot with all those thousands of other cars, but we weren't putting any carbon in the air because our terrific hybrid just, oh, you're not moving? I'll turn off. Also, the train is nice. You can sit there and play with your laptop or your devices or something. It's good times.
Right. And we used to have trains.
Make notes on paper, even if that's your thing.
Yeah. We used to have trains in Toledo, and I don't know if you get off the downtown exit on I-75 and you look to your left just before you get into the city, there's actually a monument to the trolley system. It's made up of all these twisted trolley tracks, and it's this nice spiral thing, and it's also got a lot of glass mixed in with it. It's a cool sculpture. A lot of people don't have time to look at it, but this past week I actually pulled off and went and looked at it, and I found
nice.
I found next to that little monument statue installation thing, I found the remains of the trolley tracks.
Yep.
The trolley tracks that used to go.
I've walked over those when I was walking down that way before to the market.
Right. And that actually is sort of a monument to what we could do. I mean, we could be having a sustainable transportation system, and we know this because at one point we did.
You know how a lot of people say they don't like to go downtown because there's no parking. Well, there's a way you could get there and not need parking.
Yeah. And I actually took a picture of that and showed it to my 95-year-old father-in-law who grew up in Toledo. And he was like, oh, yeah, I remember that, riding that stretch of track into downtown. So, yeah, it can be done. It should be done, and we know we have to do it. So now it's just a matter of putting the people in place who are going to make that happen, as opposed to keeping the people in place who are opposed to that happening. And Ohio had a chance to take a huge step in that direction when they looked at their energy policy this past year, but instead they decided to try to go backwards and go back to the time when we were using coal, and we had dreams, these radioactive dreams of at one point they were thinking about having literally tens of thousands of nuclear reactors all over the country. And when HB6 came along, it could have been a wonderful thing for the environment, but it turned out to be a terrible thing. And the forces that want to keep us on the path of unsustainability, the forces that want to keep us barreling along until we crash into something,
they were out in full force on this HB6. And so that's why I asked our guest today, Luke, to join us. So,
yeah.
So Luke, remember, we got to talk right into the microphone here because
Okay.
Even though you're the guest, I'm afraid you got the cheap mic. So,
understood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so you were out collecting signatures to put HB6 on the ballot as a referendum.
Correct. Yeah.
And what sort of things happened to you as you were doing that?
Well, originally I was canvassing, going around gathering signatures, and then I had moved up to management, in which not only were my experiences relayed to me by myself, everybody that was under me also, told and confided in me their influence, or the sphere of influence that the opposition put them under. What I had experienced at first were just fake petitions, right? That was within probably the first week. All those people holding the fake petitions had propagandists like, don't sell your energy to the Chinese, the same exact commercials you'd be seeing all over the place. And generally those people were hired from Michigan as well, so they wouldn't even be able to sign your petitions. And then slowly it grew to leaflets of don't sign this petition, to people wearing shirts of don't sign this petition, and then it grew and grew to people eventually tailing canvassers from location to location, and the opposition, if they saw one of my people with the referendum petition, if they saw them, they'd dial up their phone and have a van out there with several blockers to stand around them and say, don't sign this petition.
So that's so they actually dispatched vans full of blockers if they spotted one of you guys.
Yeah, and that had happened several times.
It sounds a little terrifying, actually.
Yeah, no, it definitely would instill a certain sense of paranoia into you.
Well, but remember, if they're really out to get you, then it's not paranoia. So.
Right.
But yeah, I could see where you'd be thinking.
No.
Let's just say trust issues.
Trust issues. We'll say that. Yeah, but they'd follow me. They'd follow other canvassers. There were instances in which they'd take pictures of canvassers, and it felt fairly aggressive, and it certainly was aggressive, because there shouldn't be the ability of somebody shouldn't have that ability to call a van full of people who they're clearly paying good amounts of money, like they're well organized and well staffed, and you could tell that they had money to spare from that. I know that First Energy is asking for 1.5 billion, but there was a lot of money being thrown around against us, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that money question, that there were reports that you guys were actually being offered money to stop.
Yeah, we had several. It was most of the time, even if you went out with a petition and were approached by the opposition, there'd be no doubt that they were going to ask you if you wished to join the side, and they would offer you. We've had accounts of people being offered. We've had accounts of people being offered up to $2,500, even more. But generally, they would play it as, if you come to our side, I get $1,500, I get $2,500. I'll give you some of that money. I'll split it with you, or all the way up to just blatantly saying, we'll give you that money. And yeah, that had happened pretty much to, I don't know, at least a third of our canvassers, if not more.
Wow. Well, let's see. Does anyone have any questions for Luke at 866-240-1065? That's 866-240-1065. Yeah, if you've been following this story the way we have since it started way back at the beginning of the year, you've probably read these accounts. And so now we've got a guest in the studio who actually experienced this. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note, because a lot of the stories towards the end all focused on these tactics that were being used by the opposition. But I think it's important to remember that, what exactly you were fighting for, what exactly
the petitions were trying to do.
Yeah.
And that is, they were trying to protect Ohio's alternative energy programs and energy efficiency programs.
Yeah.
Not just block the coals and the nukes, which is a worthy goal, but but you resisted the temptations they were offering you. Apparently.
Yeah, they had offered me money and I had refused. It seemed, in my opinion, the right thing to do when somebody throws that kind of money at you for their own self-interests. That I just didn't think it would.
Yeah, usually when someone's offering you a bribe, it's not to do a good thing.
No, and it definitely didn't feel that way either, you know.
Right, yeah.
Because they'd consistently push, saying, come on, you want this, trust me, we're making $8 a signature, you want the money, want the money. And that's all that they seem to be focused on so far as, like, their canvassers were concerned, and they're just completely fueled by it, and it seems like a greedy thing to me that I didn't want to identify myself with.
All right.
So I didn't.
Well, good for you, and Rebecca, I think we fully support his decision in that, right?
Yeah, that was pretty cool that you stood your ground there. The other place I've actually heard of tactics like this happening for years is in the anti-choice movement surrounding the abortion issue. Clinic staff, even people I know who just go out and volunteer to be escorts and sort of stand between patients and people trying to harass them, have been offered money to quit. Like the rationale being the narrative in the anti-choice movement is, oh, all of you are secretly racked with guilt even though you hide it really well, and so we're going to rescue you from this life of sin with this money which will help you to transition.
Money to rescue you from sin. That's an interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have a call. We have a call from Rod from Delta. Thank you, Rod, and you're on the air.
I want to know where the canvassers, what cities they were being approached in, and also I want to talk about the geese. If you go to the Delta Reservoir during the winter, I've seen as many as 2,000 geese there.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
And I watch the migration around Delta, and I don't see the birds and the ducks and the wildlife that I used to see. This year it's really short. I'm on a prepaid phone, so I'm going to have to hang up. I'll listen to your answers.
Okay, well, thanks very much for the call, Rod. All right, well, whereabouts have you heard of this happening?
Well, every event that I had went to, there were always opposition members. So any, Grand Rapids, Ohio Apple Butter Festival, pretty much any farmers market that we had been to, any and every university, from UT to BGSU to even Owens Community College out to UFF, all over the place. The opposition canvassers were just about everywhere you would think about putting a canvasser, in front of libraries.
This is what I heard. A friend of mine told me, or some people I met at a party were like, oh, yeah, we were signing that petition, House Bill 6 petition on the way here, and we headed for the guy, and 6 people tried to get in the way, screaming, don't sign it. So
that was absolutely a reality, too. And it was we seem to have limited resources, but they had somebody everywhere, and multiple people all over the place. So
well, and I think that people, the whole world of petition gathering is a fascinating one. It's a little because it sounds like, oh, you just go get a bunch of petitions from the public. How hard can that be? Well, our society has roped people off into these private places. I mean, so like if you're a petitioner, you can't go into a mall. That's where there's thousands and thousands of people in there.
Because public spaces are being more and more privatized or eliminated.
Exactly. And like even in the Toledo Park system, you can't just go stand at a park where you'd think there's a lot of people who would support a pro-environmental petition. First you have to do an application, and then there's limited numbers of
times that you can go per month, and then you're not allowed to speak.
Okay, that would make things difficult.
Yeah, you just have to stand there mutely and, with a look on your face and hope someone will talk to you.
Whereas the blockers, I'm guessing, are allowed to speak.
Well, the blockers ignored all those kinds of restrictions.
Right.
As in my experience, the ones I ran into, they were just obnoxious. And like at a library I was at, we were, told don't approach people in the parking lot. Don't, be respectful, keep your voice low, don't yell at people. And what I saw when I was people yelling, people going into the parking lots, basically they just ignored all those restrictions.
My feeling, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the times when I've done petitioning, I felt like it took emotional energy just to petition under normal circumstances. Like it was a big investment for me to do that, and really even, the really petitions that were really popular, like the time I was petitioning to decriminalize marijuana in inner city Toledo, and people were virtually trying to, knocking me down and taking away the petition to sign it. They were really enthused, but it's still hard, it's still hard to come up to people and start that many conversations. Well, I'm a little bit of an introvert, but yeah. I'm kind of amazed people can do that at all, much as less with the stormtroopers targeting you.
Right. So far as the conversations and going up and starting them, that was one of the parts of the job that I had found myself most interested in,
right?
Because I loved learning about, all different kinds of people from the area that I never had really explored before,
right?
But yeah, so far as the consistently starting off conversations and all of that is concerned, I was completely fine with it. It was when, blockers would come and interrupt those conversations because they do things like that. But yeah, no, for me, canvassing has been like a life-altering experience for me.
Wow.
In all seriousness, I had only done it for, I'd say, a month or so, and then I moved up to management fairly quickly, and then I saw how the democratic process, works. It seems to fight every step of the way.
Yeah.
It seems like that, and I've seen that now firsthand. That's definitely given me new outlook and new experiences that I will keep with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, petitioning is that's the base of democracy, because if you want to get it on the ballot as a candidate or an issue on the ballot, the first step is you've got to go and get permission from other citizens through these petitions. And yeah, I have found it a very invigorating experience when I've carried petitions. What you get to do is you get to actually meet and talk to all these people that before that you just have these images that are presented to you by the media and, impressions you get from things that are published online and so forth. But when you actually talk to people, you find out they're a lot nicer.
Yeah.
People are basically good and interested, and if you're doing something, they want to hear about it normally,
In this era of polarization and, Facebook and people just sort of doing ritualized screaming at each other, You say this buzzword, I say this buzzword, only angrier, that's kind of a revelation, we still have this thing that we do in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. All right. So 866-240-1065. If you have any more questions for Luke, or if you have anything at all to say, and we appreciate the call from Rod. And it's too bad to hear from Rod that even in Delta that the bird counts are down. I mean, that's been what I've seen, and we know why they're going down. They're going down because of things we're putting into the environment, pesticides, and they're going down because of climate change, because migration patterns for birds are incredibly intricately timed, and that is often there'll be bird migrations that are timed to come out. Let's say you've got a bird that eats insects. Well, there might be this one kind of insect down in South Carolina or something that hatches at like a particular point in the fall, And so the birds have timed, over thousands of years, timed their migrations to be at that spot, at that place when all the insects hatch, and then they take up on those insects and go on their migration. But now climate change is changing the dates for all those things. And so these carefully calibrated migrations are getting disrupted. So
it used to be, you would worry about the wildlife in the spring, when you would have sort of a fake spring, and then, the frost and an ice storm would come back, and you'd be like, oh no, all those poor birds, they had their babies, and the little buds on the trees were all right. What are they going to do? A bunch of them probably just died. You wonder if it's going to be bad this year. And now that's kind of every year.
Yeah.
Because of the crazy going back and forth between hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold.
Yeah, I know. It's been a long time since we've had a normal year. And that was one of the things as we were driving south. I was watching the trees, and a lot of them haven't turned yet. A lot of them are still green down there. And some now, all of a sudden, we did have a really fast fall. I mean, when we came back, it was like a lot of the trees that just had a few leaves turned when we left a few days ago, those leaves are gone now.
It was all kind of August, November.
Great. So this is a confusing time for all of us, but one thing that we can be sure of is that we here at For a Green Future appreciate our sponsors, and so it's time to hear from them. One of our sponsors is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. We protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature, restore wildlife habitat, and lead outdoor adventures. The Wood County Parks protects 20 parks and game preserves around Wood County. They're open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset, literally every day of the year. And you can get in touch with them by calling them at 419-353-1897, or you can check them out on the web at wcparks.org. And they have a nifty app that you can download from the App Store, and the name of that app is just WC Parks. And you can, by using that app or by contacting them or looking at their website, you can see some of the really cool stuff that WC Parks does all year long. And for example, they're doing a lot of things, spooky things around Halloween in conjunction with the Wood County Historical Museum, which is there on County Home Road just south of Bowling Green. And they also do a monthly a nature book club, which people read a book about nature and then get together and talk about it. And then they have all kinds of events. So definitely check out the Wood County Park District. And they're your direct link to nature in this area. So our other sponsor is DeMar Consulting. DeMar Consulting is a computer consulting company, and they will come to your home, and they'll help you with any computer problem you have, whether it's that your computer is not talking to your printer, or whether something in your home network just refuses to hook up to your home network. They will come and diagnose the problem and help you out. Everyone at DeMar Consulting has a degree in computer science, so you know that they know what they're talking about. And there's a few ways to get a hold of them. One is to call or text at 419-973-3000. That's 419-973-3000. Or you can go online to demarconsulting.com. And DeMar Consulting is spelled D-E-M-A-R-E, then the word consulting, and none of those fancy dashes or hyphens or any of that stuff. So just demarconsulting.com for all your home computing needs. All right. Well, we're back with our non-commercial part of the show. And I wanted to, if anyone wants to call in at 866-240-1065 with questions for Lance, he's going to stay with us here in the studio for the rest of the show. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and one of the things we say on the show every week is that we want to talk about you and your health and how the environment affects your health. Well, one of the ways that the environmental issues affect your health is in terms of what it does to what we eat and drink. And there's a very specific product that most of us love. It's tea, and Rebecca actually has a bottle of tea in the studio. You can't
see. I've got my own tea bag in there, actually, because I reuse the bottles, because I get the kinds with the wide mouth that you can get a tea bag into and, more importantly, out of.
So you made tea in an old
in a tea bottle.
Tea bottle. Okay, that
I'm thrifty.
Yeah, that is very.
And I really like tea.
That's very eco-conscious. So, unfortunately, there have been some reports in the media lately about tea, and one of the things that was reported is a study done by a chemical engineer. Her name is Natalie Tufenkji, and she's from McGill University in Montreal. And this lady just went to a tea house near her university for lunch one day, and she noticed that the tea bag was made of plastic. And she was like, this can't be good. And she's a chemical engineer, and just the idea that you're going to put plastic into hot water, I mean, we're talking water close to boiling, like 200 degrees or so. And plastic has this habit of when you heat it up, it degrades, it breaks down. And so she knew this and thought, how could this be? So she took the tea bags and she did a quick study with her graduate students, and they just grabbed a bunch of tea bags and did this test on them. And they were expecting to find some particles of plastic. They were like, there's got to be some. And in fact, like in your typical bottle of bottled water, which I'm embarrassed to say I have a bottled water thing here. According to the World Health Organization, you're going to find hundreds, maybe a thousand or so bits of microplastic in something like this. Well, their tests on these plastic tea bags, which ironically it's the high-end teas that use the plastic bags for some reason, they discovered 11.6 billion microparticles and 6 billion nanoparticles, which are even tinier and even more dangerous because nanoparticles do really weird things inside of bodies. They can slip in between cells.
Oh dear.
And they can get into basically any part of a body. And they're so tiny that they don't obey the normal laws of physics. They can be moved around by things like magnetic fields.
Oh my God! Wow.
And so they were discovering literally billions of these particles in the plastic tea bags. And so that I would say that would be the first tip we might offer here on For a Green Future is don't buy tea bags with plastic bags. So that's something. And then it turns out that there's another problem with tea that's been recognized, and that is that the countries like China specifically, they get a lot of their heat from coal, which, is one of those things that got supported in HB 6. It's supported some of our most polluting coal plants in the country. But what these coal plants do is they put heavy metals into the air, like lead and like cadmium. And they can get up to dangerous levels in your tea. Tea from China is kind of dangerous in terms of, the amount of lead that you can that you can get in there. And it turns out that these plastic particles make the heavy metal problem even worse.
Yeah.
Because the heavy metals can be attracted to the plastic and stick to the plastic particles and then get carried into your body, whereas you might not have drunk them before. They might have stayed towards the bottom with all the sludge from the tea and so forth. Because there's all these plastic particles floating around, it picks them up so that you can be sure to drink them.
Oh, great.
So,
well, being broke is for once working in my favor here. That's nice.
Oh, because you can't afford the expensive teas.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go.
Plus, I don't know. Ironically, I've read that there are unsubstantiated rumors, by which I mean thousands of years of Chinese medical tradition, that tea from special trees, from the right sort of Camellia sinensis trees brewed right, can actually help cure cancer. So if you had the really, really, really good stuff, you might be breaking even.
Well,
but that kind of stuff it comes in. It's like more expensive than cocaine per ounce or something. Like the really trees that have been in families for a few hundred years. We're talking.
Well, the health benefits of tea are undisputed.
Right.
So don't stop drinking tea. They're very antioxidant, and they can so they prevent cell damage, and they've been linked to ameliorating the symptoms at least, or helping with all kinds of things like Alzheimer's and other
Plus,
diseases.
you can get the kind that just is leaves, which you boil yourself. That it's just a little inconvenient when you're on the go, especially if you ride the bus around, then it can get difficult.
And one health tip I wanted to pass on here about this whole issue is that green tea, which is made from the green leaves, the young leaves, has much, much less of these heavy metals and these toxins than the older teas, than the black tea.
Although they say it's healthier, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, so green or white teas that are made with the young leaves, and the reason is simply that the older tea leaves sit there in the air longer, and so they have more time to absorb more of these heavy metals and more of these particulates as they come out of the ground.
So it's a curing process. It's like, if you had something from your garden that you wanted to dry, or herbs or flowers or whatever, you leave it out and let it dry. Get air circulation. Mm-hmm. If your air has heavy metals, not a good idea.
Right. If you're downwind from a smokestack.
Right.
And if you're anywhere in southern Ohio, you're downwind from a coal smokestack right now. So,
yeah.
So it's just and I thought one interesting thing about the study that the gal with the plastic did is that she used the water flea, Daphnia, to check and see if there were health effects from all these billions and billions of plastic particles. And yes, she did notice that the Daphnia were swimming around erratically, which means they're not healthy, and they were coming out, generations were coming out that were kind of misshapen. So, it does have some health effects. And I just thought it was an interesting thing. Again, one theme that we talk about on this show all the time is that everything is connected. And so the Chinese government has decided we're going to burn coal without a whole bunch of pollution controls on it. So there's one thing. And then that contaminates the tea. That's another thing. And then some bright person in some industry decided we're going to make tea bags out of plastic.
Oh, yeah.
And there's another thing. And then so this scientist who put it all together used this little tiny microscopic water flea, they're called, which is one of the most common animals in the world, this microscopic Daphnia, and to show us that this is going to hurt us if we keep doing it. And so I think in a reasonable society, and at once upon a time, what would happen now is some legislator would propose banning plastic tea bags, and there might even be a federal law. But we're in a different time. We're in a time when things are being made worse by the government instead of better.
I think the deal with that is probably, if you have a regular paper tea bag, which I don't know, I know people, I don't know if they should be doing this, who go ahead and put paper tea bags in their compost bin because they're so flimsy, like they just break right down and become soil virtually. I don't know whether they should be doing that, but they do, I think the deal is, when the tannic acid from the tea hits the tea bag, it gets all brown looking. And whereas the plastic ones stay all nice and clear and bright looking and transparent, so they look nicer.
Mm-hmm.
They look nicer and cleaner and fancier.
I see. Yeah. That could explain why they're doing it.
And they kind of don't cling as much. So like they're stronger. So you could if you have like a fancy tea you paid a lot of money for, it can kind of brew inside, and they're weirdly like pyramid shaped, triangular.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it can move around and brew inside of the thing.
Right. That's the idea, is that they can mix better in the tea bag.
Right.
But not worth the cost. Definitely.
Not really.
Save your money, buy the cheaper green tea, and it might be better for you.
There you go.
And one notion or one number I wanted to toss out there is that the Trump administration is pushing back on all kinds of environmental regulations. And one of the things that they push back on, one of the things they've allowed more pollution with is particulate matter. And the same sort of particulate matter that China allows to come out of their smokestacks, Trump is allowing to come out of our smokestacks. And in fact, there's been a increase in particulate matter released into the air by factories and by power plants under Trump. And according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, that the pollution has increased 5.5% every year since Trump took office and slashed the regulations. And that can be tied directly to a spike in deaths, premature deaths from inhaling these, particulates and having lung disease.
Yeah.
So I have said in this show on the past that Trump is trying to kill you. I mean, you and your family. And if you know anybody who has asthma or any kind of respiratory disease, he's the one they're after.
Canary in the coal mine.
Yeah. And so 9,700 people just last year who could still be alive today have been killed in the United States by Trump's slashing of environmental regulations. So if you know someone who's passed away from lung problems, think about that. Think about, maybe they wouldn't have passed away if Trump hadn't slashed all these regulations. And so the amount of fine particulate matter in the air used to be going down from 2009 to 2016. Under Obama, he actually increased regulations. And so it dropped in those 7 years, it dropped 25%. But since Trump took over, it's going back up 5% a year. So we know this is like a scientific experiment. You had your precondition, you did something, you changed the regulations. The problem got better under Obama. Particulate went down 24%. Then we experimented with a Trump kind of president, and the particulate matter is going up 5% a year ever since then. So
there's a thing that I think it was Louis Napoleon III, Napoleon's nephew, whoever took over for him, said, I think France had some kind of interest in Egypt at the time, and he said this thing. He said, under a good pharaoh, the Nile gains on the desert. Under a bad pharaoh, the desert gains on the Nile.
Interesting. So even back then, we noticed the same thing.
It was the job of the people in power to take care of the environment, because the environment takes care of the people. So if you fail at that, you're failing at everything.
Right. And so, I mean, I've been, of course, if you watch the news, you can't help but hear about all this stuff in terms of the impeachment and all that. But in a way, that kind of stuff sort of is distracting us from the real physical problems that are being caused by this administration. That it's one thing to break a law about influence or, bribery or whatever, but it's another thing to change the environment and start killing people. And to me, that's a much worse sin. That's why we should be.
Well, but, the abstract morality of doing things which are against the rules is in service of selling out America to corporate interests who are going to run it into ground.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. A lot of what that bribery and a lot of what that influence does is to buy poorer environmental protections. I mean, I've often noticed there seems to be an inverse proportion in terms of how much you get paid versus how good you are for the environment. So people who are doing wonderful things for the environment are actually getting paid almost nothing, whereas people that are literally destroying huge swaths of the planet are getting millions of billions of dollars. It's kind of insane. We need to flip that around.
We're incentivizing all the wrong things.
Right. So, but Lance, or Luke, excuse me, since we have you here, the anti-referendum people, the pro-HB6 people, who are getting all this money, did you get any kind of impression about what they actually knew about the issue? Did they actually have knowledge of what they were doing, or was it more, this is my job?
Some people had come up to me, and particularly the career canvassers had admitted that they would have wished to have done the referendum petition, but this was just paying more. So that's where I saw that come into play, and a lot of them were very fueled by the cash grab versus what it was that they actually believed in. And some people were entirely ignorant to the fact that it was even a blocking campaign. So they just thought, on one hand, you have the career canvassers who knew exactly what was going on. Then the other hand, people who were just Michigan hires who just took a job basically.
So that's interesting, though, that if you were to take a poll of the blockers themselves and ask them, would you support subsidizing coal and nuclear power and slashing funds for renewable and energy efficiency, they would probably be with the rest of us, with the majority of Ohioans.
Yeah, no, some definitely voiced their opinions to me, but we just didn't pay enough money, essentially.
Wow. Okay, well, that has some very scary implications for democracy itself then, if it becomes just a contest of who can offer the most money. But I think that part of what we need to learn from this whole situation with this referendum is that the referendum project became a wholly corporate project. That is, that was just professional petition gatherers and professional blockers.
Mm-hmm.
There was no volunteer element here. I mean, some of the people I know, like in the Sierra Club, who were very passionate about this and wanted the referendum to go, were kind of frustrated by the fact that the only way they could help get referendum petition signatures was to get hired and to start doing it professionally. Some of them did. Some of them, and I know some of them were some of the most productive petitioners on the referendum side. But I think that the cure for this has got to be more volunteerism. It can't be more professionalism. It can't be, going more and more towards the money-only model of politics, because ultimately the money doesn't care who's right or wrong.
Yeah.
As you said, I mean, this is an issue that has real implications for our health and our future, and to change that issue from which is the right decision for Ohio to simply which side has the most money,
right.
That is just against not only democracy itself, but it's against us surviving.
Right. It certainly puts a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
Especially experiencing that.
Right.
And seeing that's what their driving factor is.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, I've heard some rumors from Columbus that a lot of the organizations there are actually sort of getting together and talking about next steps. One thing that might be happening is there could be an appeal to the Ohio State Supreme Court, because the company that was doing the petitions appealed to the federal court, saying that our First Amendment rights were being blocked by these blockers, and that the Secretary of State, by holding onto the petitions for the maximum amount of time he could, essentially was doing a pocket veto, because he used up 40 of the 90 petitioning days just holding on to the petitions and saying, you can't petition yet till I tell you you can. In federal court, that argument failed. The federal judge said, basically he just said, how did he put it? He said, no, free speech isn't a First Amendment question. No, that's not a quote. But right. That's the gist of what he said, is that blocking someone's speech isn't a First Amendment question. It's a state of Ohio question, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But that's what he did. And so, but in his opinion, he said, but take it to the Ohio State Supreme Court. So some organizations are looking at that, and they might. Problem is, of course, the Ohio State Supreme Court is all very conservative, does not have a good track record of protecting the environment or people's rights. So there might be even less of a chance there than there was in the federal court. But some are still trying to do that. And there is also some talk of possibly getting together and creating an initiative, which is a referendum is what you have in Ohio if you want to vote yes or no on a law that got put into place by the legislature. That's a referendum.
Okay. But
an initiative is when the people actually make a law. So you can write out a law, and if you get enough people to sign it, it'll get put on the ballot, and enough people vote on it, it'll be made into law. So there is some talk of creating an initiative that would put Ohio's energy policy on the right track, on the sustainable track, restoring funds for energy efficiency and renewables, and taking away these things. the problem with that, I think we've seen what would happen. We have a taste of what would happen if we managed to do this. We would again need hundreds of thousands of signatures, and we would again be faced with this kind of suppression. So no decisions have been made yet that I know of, but it is a possibility that this might happen. Some of the groups, Ohio Environmental Council was very active in promoting the referendum. The Ohio Citizen Action was also very effective and really worked on the petition. And the Sierra Club's No Nuclear Part Division and Beyond Coal Division were both fully behind this. And in the last few days of the petitioning, all over the state, groups like that got together, and they had signing events at private venues where the blockers couldn't come. And they would come, and dozens and dozens of people came, hundreds actually around the state came and signed petitions in those situations. The problem is, of course, they're rallying hundreds of people, and you needed to rally tens of thousands. And,
right.
And logistically, the only practical way to do that, as Luke knows, is that you have to go to public events where there are tens of thousands of people, because you really just can't. You can't go into the malls. You can't go into any private venues. Libraries are great, people going in and out of them, but they're not going in and out at the rate of thousands an hour. The only thing you can do is go to parks and huge public events, fairs, and things like that, and that's when you can get enough signatures to actually put something like this on the ballot. And the blockers know this, and they know strategically, because they're just looking at this as a strategic thing. If they can block access to those strategic points, they can block democracy itself. So
it's kind of come down to, well, you can have your little democracy so long as nobody with money objects. Just don't inconvenience anybody with money.
Yeah. So kind of a grim situation, but Luke, I wanted to have you on the air and publicly thank you for for doing this.
Yeah,
even though
absolutely.
You could have made a little more money by selling out.
I would rather not give in to the greed.
All right, well, good, because not giving it to the greed is key to the green future. And we know that we have a green future because every week my great-great-granddaughter, Marie I, sends me a letter back from the year 2299. There's this flash of photons next to my bed, and very dependably, there's my letter from the future. So we're going to read this week's letter right now. Dear Great-Great-Grandpa, well, it's been an interesting week for me. Michael has been getting increasingly frustrated with the technical problems with the drilling. The drill has to go much deeper before we can safely dispose of the radioactive waste generated in your time, but the shifting rocks deep below the surface are twisting the drill bit around. So far, they have not been able to come up with a solution. Michael was so angry last week that he actually yelled at me. I guess we had our first big fight. I decided to take a few days off and went to visit Igor's family. You remember I went with them for a week last spring as they were migrating along with the caribou herds. Well, it was as if I had never left. Everyone was happy to see me, and I again found myself slipping naturally into the rhythms of the tribe. Igor and I didn't get to spend much time together, but the winter time has a totally different feel than the migration. Everyone was much more relaxed. There was more storytelling and joking. I even picked up a few more Sami words. It was a nice break from my lab work. Maybe Igor and I can stay in touch as friends. Anyway, when I got back, Michael was very sorry and actually took a few hours off to go cross-country skiing with me. I hope he finds a solution soon. The whole project depends on it. Bye for now, GGG. Hang in there. Love, Marie I. So.
All right, so we let Michael know he has some competition and he has to step up his game.
It looks that way. It looks like he responded to the challenge. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future. So we're just very happy to have a letter coming back, because one of the points we stress constantly in this show is that we will make it. We will get to the green future. We'll have a sustainable energy supply. We'll have clean manufacturing, and we know we're going to do this, because if we don't, the other thing is, again, societal collapse, and that's not in anybody's benefit, not even for the benefit of these billionaires that think, they have all the answers, and because they're billionaires, they know what to do. Well, there were billionaires backing this House Bill 6 law, and they obviously don't know what they're doing because they're promoting the worst possible energy policy for all of us. So just remember that. Just because someone's a billionaire doesn't mean he has any clue as to what's going on in the real world. So just a thought to end with. So this is Joe DeMar.
And Rebecca Wood.
And our special guest,
Luke Kasparian.
And thank you all for listening. This is Joe DeMar signing off. The sun.